guess maybe only me, who doesn't follow this.
You should.
Like, I'm getting that sense that I should follow this. But who are you?
As another layman you guys might know about, when he found himself inexplicably adapted into the streets of Ascleia, I feel like by all rights I shouldn't even be here. I also want to thank Bre Melvin, who generously allowed us to use some of the art that's been created through the SilmFilm project that you're seeing up there right now. Okay, so the Silmarillion Film Project, or SilmFilm as the contributors tend to call it, has been attempting to what has been considered by many to be impossible since the publishing of the Silmarillion in 1977. When Stanley Kubrick was approached to direct a Lord of the Rings movie starring the Beatles in the late 60s, he called the film unfilmable. That's Stanley Kubrick, the guy who directed 2001: A Space Odyssey, which some might consider to be a 15-minute film that takes 2.5 hours to watch. How much more unfilmable is the sprawling mythological and historical compilation that is the Silmarillion? To be honest, there have been times that I've been glad that it was a purely theoretical endeavor, as I find the idea of filming the Ainulindale fundamentally terrifying. As I'm certain many of you can relate to, one of the things that has kept me coming back to Tolkien's writings was how I could see something new with each rereading. Some new nugget I had somehow missed in the, I'm going to go with hundreds of previous readings. What I discovered through this project, however, was how much I still had missed that others had caught on to. One of the great beauties of Tolkien's work, as I've said many times during the project, is how everyone can find something there. We all come from different backgrounds, both formatively and professionally. Some of us come from completely different countries and cultures. We all view the world through different lenses. Some only mildly dissimilar, while others vastly different, yet we can all find meaning in the same collection of stories. Some gravitate to those ideas which are inherently Christian, others find the more pagan roots attractive. The others find merit in the more scholarly virtues, and some find traces of modern humanism or environmentalism. Many span more than one of these perspectives. What has become a monumental task has been the incorporating of these themes so that the applicability of our work will mirror that in Professor Tolkien. As our Valor discover in the first season when they first arrive in Arda, harmony is not always easy, even with, I hope, the best of intentions. This is no more exemplified than when we propose departures from the published texts, whether it be mere additions or sometimes full reversals. We ran the risk of sappy modern pacifism when we had Manwë make a diplomatic overture to Melkor. A desperate rescue mission was held to save the epic nature of the Lamps of Almern, which Professor Olson may remember to my detriment. The battle over the origin and nature of the orcs continues to rage on our discussion boards, as it does with fans all over the world. Though Tolkien himself couldn't make a decision on that particular point, how could we possibly do so? One of the greatest things to strike me, however, did so as I was preparing for this talk. It's something that has been gnawing at the back of my mind, but it really came through as I started to think about this. Our efforts have been and will continue to be scholarly in nature. While we may occasionally indulge in private fantasies, no one should entertain the notion that we are actually producing any of this. So why, some might ask, would we engage in what could certainly be regarded as an epic waste of time? The project itself as a thought experiment certainly has value. It has certainly exercised our creative muscles as storytellers, artists, composers, and as broadcasters as we maintain video and audio records of the project's different facets. What occurred to me as I sat preparing for this talk, however, was just how important this task truly is. While there's no evidence that the Tolkien estate has any interest in releasing film rights to the Silmarillion anytime soon, I find it difficult to believe that Hollywood would forget the financial success of the Jackson films. I'm certain that not now or even in the next 5 years, but in our lifetimes, we will see the Silmarillion emblazoned on cinema marquees worldwide. If you felt that the departure from the source material is great in the Jackson films, you will find a film under the name Silmarillion completely unrecognizable from the text. Such a film, even a trilogy of films, would not be an adaptation but a distillation. While our project is an academic one, a series like this, I think, must be created before a large studio gets their claws into the film rights, making them forever unavailable to anyone whose goal is to faithfully, not slavishly, but faithfully, bring the stories the book contains to the screen, rather than rake in the billions that a Hollywood film or series of films will produce. With this in mind, I've begun to see our project not only as an experiment, but as a guide which, when used by the right collection of artists, can be instrumental in lovingly crafting something against which any financially motivated adaptation would pale in comparison. I'd like to encourage everyone that's here to look into the material, if you haven't already, that's been created on Professor Olson's podcast with Trish Lambert and Dave Kale, as well as on our discussion boards, or even in the video discussions of the script team, which are available on YouTube, as this will be. I challenge you to I also challenge you to get involved in what has been an intensely rewarding, if sometimes arduous, task. I think you'll find it well worth it.
Okay. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the topics that have come up in the script discussions and some of the things we talk about, just for anyone who hasn't been following the project, just to know what it is we're doing. One of the fun things about developing the Silmarillion into a series, very long series of television, is that you can take a look at minor characters and kind of bring them to life a little bit more. They might be no more than a name on the page in the original material, so then you have to kind of look at what their background is and what their role of the story is and how you're going to portray them. And we can discuss how we want to see different characters. So a minor character like Círdan, the shipwright, who shows up multiple times in Tolkien stories, but almost always on the edge, never really in the middle of things. You know he's an old wise elf, but at the end of Lord of the Rings, but what is he all about? You don't really get to know him. And in the SilmFilm Project, we're going to have to see him on screen in multiple episodes over different seasons of the show, starting in the second season when the elves reach the sea for the first time. So we'll see a young Círdan seeing the sea for the first time before he builds any ships, and then grow into this old wise character later. So seeing that, you kind of have to make choices about what his original view is, if that changed over time, if he was always a wise elf who just got older, or if he was maybe more young and impetuous and kind of had to grow into that role. You have to make those kinds of choices and see where you're going with it. I do think Círdan is obscure. For the frame, we're framing the story out with events from the Third Age, and the first season frame we use young Aragorn in Rivendell being taught by Elrond, and his mother's there. Aragorn's mother, that really famous person that is named Gilraen, that everyone knows about, right? She has a total line in the appendix of Lord of the Rings. So developing her character has been a bit more of a challenge because we set it up as the young widow trying to raise her son around a bunch of elves and trying to make sure that he gets his heritage, and then Elrond, the old wise elf, having a different viewpoint of what it means to educate someone, having different views of life, and kind of putting that together. We were given the direction that we should base her on Andreth from the Afterbeth, the discussion between Finrod and Andreth from First Age, which is great until you try and actually come up with scenes where the two of them interact with each other, because if you have her just complaining all the time about everything that Elrond does, she comes across as like this weird, ungrateful helicopter mom who doesn't really get that Elrond's trying to do something to help her kid, and she's not a very sympathetic character. So having someone complain in a way that is not seen as negative all the time is actually challenging, because we tried to get rid of some of that, and then all the conflict in the frame disappeared, which was also not good. So the balance of trying to develop a characterization that doesn't seem trite or cliche or whatever is not always as straightforward as you would think. It's not just well, we want to do what Tolkien did. Well, of course we do. We want to present the characters that he put together, but he didn't always develop all these stories that we're trying to tell, so we have to make something out of it. Okay. All right, and so one of the probably more difficult scenes to adapt for the first season of the SilmFilm Project was there's an added scene that takes place to explain how Tulkas ends up in Middle-earth. And
You should probably explain the scope of season 1.
oh, sorry. Season 1 is the Aina delay to the war between the Powers and Morgoth at the end of that time.
The chaining of Melkor.
Yes, the chaining of Melkor. Before there's elves. There's no elves. No elves in season 1. We're in season 2 now, and there's elves, so it's much more interesting. So I'm doing our project now. It's the fun part. But anyway, season 1 we were
We've
just
done all the hard work already, so.
yeah. Season 1 was just practice, just to see if we could figure this stuff out. You know, it's just Valor. Who cares about them? But I mean.
The Tulkas, we're talking about
Tulkas, yes. So we had a scene where Nessa, one of the Valar, is kidnapped by Ungoliants and then needs to be rescued. And this all happens prior to her marriage to Tulkas. And the challenge was because we just created this damsel in distress who needs to be rescued by, the really strong Vala, who would then marry her afterwards, rescuing the princess from the castle kind of thing. So that's a common story. That gets told all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Except it's not really a common story for Tolkien. The damsel in distress, he always kind of twists that a little bit. So, Luthien rescues Beren. Fingon rescues Maedhros. Sam rescues Frodo from the Tower of Cirith Ungol in Lord of the Rings. He doesn't typically have...
Galadriel rescues Gandalf.
Yeah, there's lots of rescues. He uses the story, but...
Turin fails to rescue Findulian.
Yeah, exactly. The one time it could have happened, Turin. Yeah. So Tolkien didn't really use that story, and it seemed odd to use it in the Silmarillion material and keep it Tolkien. So we had to try to figure out how to balance the idea of Nessa needing to be rescued with all of Tolkien's later work that we were trying to tie together. And we decided to focus on Nessa's strength in that situation and not necessarily a needing to be rescued thing. She wasn't tied up in a spider web somewhere. So we allowed her to express some of the themes for the season of trust in the will of the Iluvatar regardless of what happens. She wasn't really afraid of what was going to happen to her in this situation. And by letting her voice the theme and kind of be the central character, it at least moved it a little bit away from what could have been unrecognizably part of the Silmarillion story. So that's the type of thing we discussed in the script discussion, is trying to figure out what are the characters' motivations, how can we build a scene that actually shows what we're supposed to be showing, because they tell us what to do. And we usually do it, unless we don't like what they say, and then we ignore everything, throw it out, and start over. But mostly, as long as it's a workable idea, we can make something happen. But we need to develop the scenes that actually show the story we're trying to tell. So.
Yeah, well, there were a few things. One of the contributors who's from, I believe he's from Sweden or Norway. He goes by Hakan on the script discussion on the forums. Yeah. And he came up with this idea, which I thought was brilliant, of having the introduction of Fiantori take place after the destruction of the lamps, when they're looking for a new place to settle down, and Manwë happens upon what's going to become Valinor. And while this was a departure, it solved a couple of problems. One, it solves the problem of having to introduce 12 characters, 14 characters? Yeah, 14 characters right out of the gate. It solved the problem of what are these people going to be doing this entire time? Because you basically have, you have Aule and Olmo and Yavanna, they all have jobs to do in the creation of art. Mandos...
There's no dead people yet.
Yeah. You could make a case that Lorien has a job, but it's not really as big a thing yet. So, and because of the attachment of the Fiantori to the concept of destiny, it kind of confirms that, yes, this is where you're going to be. Whether the choice to the Valinor impulse, as Professor Olson likes to say, is a correct one or not, it is one that is going to happen. And Iluvatar knows this. So.
any questions?
Yeah, anybody have any questions?
You said there's some ideas to throw out. What's the worst idea for me to make?
What do you find out?
This is
I think most people who follow this thing know what mine is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay. As we were constructing, because for the first season, we were probably, what, 2 or 3 months behind when we started the script discussion. So we were really kind of like laying down the tracks as the train was coming up behind us. So by the time we got to about a halfway point in the season where we have the construction of the Lamps of Almarin, Professor Olson and Trish Lambert and Dave Kale were having a session on the set design, right? So we finished our episode of the Lamps, and then the following week, they said, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if the lamps, instead of being these huge towers that like shone light over all of Florida, were very local to Almarin. And I didn't find out about this until after the fact, and my brain exploded. And
He was not happy.
no, I wasn't happy, and I vehemently, immediately started writing a big long treatise on the forums and started a Twitter campaign, but it worked. So all's well that ends well. Anything good?
I started seeing all these tweets with the hashtag Save the Lamps. I didn't understand.
I put it into the chat once the girls of Middle Earth when Trish was on streaming for on Loki, and I threw that on there, and she was like, "Yeah, save the lamps." I don't think she had any idea what I was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, in general, we've been able to work with
Yeah.
what they've come up with, and if we do make changes, we put them into our script outlines and then turn them in and let them figure out what they want to do about it.
Yeah, if they don't like it, they can always fire us. So.
Since we're not paying them, it's easy to do. No, it's actually, I've really enjoyed that part of the process. I mean, never at any point was this meant to be about like, I know just how to do it, and so I'm going to unfold my thing. I mean, this always designed to be a collaborative project, and I've almost always loved the things that I see in the outlines that we didn't think of at all. It's been really good.
For the, I guess maybe only me who doesn't follow this.
You should.
I'm getting that sense that I should follow this, but who are you?
Just random people. My name is Bre, and
But I mean, like, you write the scripts.
right.
What are these other people doing if you're not writing scripts?
No, that's us. We're just talking.
So Corey Olson, Trish Lambert, and Dave Kale are the executive producers who are coming up with the guidelines of what the show is going to look like and what's going to happen in each episode. So they get to decide things like the content of a season, what the climactic events at the end are going to be, the framing device, like young Aragorn and Rivendell, that's their choice. We didn't get to choose the frame.
We had input.
We did, yes. I mean,
Well,
of course.
the project as a whole did.
I mean, basically, we just pester them with ideas if they don't pick the things we like, and they have to deal with that. But
So, I mean, the basic idea from the beginning, it started when Dave and Trish and I were doing the Rails in the Dark podcast. We were going in and talking about the adaptation challenges in The Hobbit, and then that ended, and I was thinking, well, that was so much fun. It would be even better is if these discussions were not hampered by an actual film. Then we could really, So basically, what the idea was, the concept is, in the actual podcast episodes, we sort of go through episode by episode and just kind of talk about the big picture of the story, sort of particular themes and challenges and ideas. And we're not like producing a a sort of a concrete tied together thing. We're sort of discussing issues and throwing out ideas, and raising questions, often which we don't answer. Sometimes which I explicitly turf to them. I'm like, so I'm looking forward to hear what you guys have to say about this. And there have been, it's become basically through a really organic process, a big community project where we have some people like Nick and Marie were two of the primary people who came in to help with who really wanted to write the script, who really wanted to work out that. Karita is involved in that as well. We've had others like Bre, who did the pictures here, is one of the people who are doing costume designing suggestions and sets and lots of casting discussion. Whom would we cast for the different roles? So it's sort of a big collaborative, imaginative project, basically. And
Oh, I have an answer to your question now. They cast Elrond wrong.
Yes, Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah. I don't think it's a bad choice,
Well,
but
somebody made the wrong
we don't agree on this.
Yes, one question to you. I'm done with the first season and probably the second season. Is there a story or an element of that you come on to that you say, God, you really wish, would have been told more by that you really had gone into greater depth and fleshed out. It could be different answers from different people. So I'm just trying to what aspect that really surprised you as you got into it?
Yeah, in our discussions, different people are focused on different things. So we do have some people who help us out who are very structurally oriented about how to plan a TV show and what needs to happen at different times in the episode to build to and everything. We're interested in the character conflict. My role is basically to try to remember what all the details are from what we've already decided and like what Tolkien said in this text and what So to put all the details together is what I try to usually focus on because that's my interest. And there are places where it would be really nice if he had written more on certain topics.
Right.
But since this is adaptation, if he didn't write it, we get to make whatever decision we think fits best. So it's.
So what story is it that you would love to tell that's part of it that hasn't been told?
Well, I have an interest in Feanorians. So anything that involves more time spent with Feanorians usually makes me happy. But yeah, this is a creative project more than a scholarly project. So you just invent the scenes that you want to see more.
Well, one thing that I can think of as I'm thinking about this, about your question, for example, I think about the situation where Maedhros, he's chained up to the top of the tower. He basically comes back one-handed, right? And he learns how to fight again with just the one hand. And that to me, I immediately start getting these images flooding into my mind of this guy. Like, I don't know if anybody. I'm not a Game of Thrones watcher, but I know that there's a similar scene to that that takes place, and that's a really fascinating story. This guy overcoming this handicap, literally, that he just says that it happens, and it takes about a sentence to do. But we basically now have to create an entire episode or storyline. Well, montage, yeah. There's a training montage. Yeah, that's what you do in these circumstances. Around that one sentence. But that's a lot of what happens is that there's a single sentence that describes something. But that doesn't work on film. You now have to create.
You have to create the feeling that you get when you read that sentence in a totally different way. Because yes, he learned to fight more deadly with his left hand than he ever had with his right is a really cool concept, and you realize, the orcs flowed before his face, that Maedhros is someone you don't want to meet in battle post Bangorjum. But we need to show him who he was before that, so that the difference will be really obvious. And you can't just expect that the really scary face of the actor is going to do the trick there. You need to have a story. And I think we should definitely, in the Valinorian material, have scenes of Feanor teaching his sons how to fight with swords that's, playful and silly because no one really cares yet and no one's going to die. And then it all gets really serious really fast in season 3. And that's the other thing is that this is a very negative story. Lots of bad things are going to happen to all the characters. But season 1's fairly positive and light.
Yeah.
And season 2 is mostly good until the end. And then season 3 is going to be like unmitigated darkness.
Yeah.
And again, when she says positive until the end, we're talking about the darkening of Valinor, is what happens at the end of the
Yeah.
season. So season 2 goes from the awakening at Queen Vianna to the darkening of Valinor.
Yeah, so we have happy elves for one whole season, and then we kill them all.
Most of the
Do we want to sell French stories?
I'll tell you what, if, talk to me later, I can at least get you her Tumblr information, and I'm sure that she'd be happy to talk to you at least about it, and so. But I had a very brief conversation with her about this.
Yeah, but we're good tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Real
if
quick.
you're interested in getting involved in the script discussion, we are going to do one here, live from midnight, in this room.
In this room?
It's available, yeah.
Oh, okay,
I
awesome.
asked first.
Okay.
After everything's over tomorrow, we're going to stick around for maybe a couple hours and talk about the next episode, which is about Círdan and Alway mostly.
Very mostly, yeah.
And also the elves getting to Valinor for the first time.
Yeah.
So that material. If anyone's interested, you're welcome to join us.